Okay, in this little segment here, I'm going to talk about what it means to rearrange a formula or what it means to solve for a variable. One of the most important things that I think people have a misunderstanding or misinterpret is the idea of solving for a variable. Because prior to this, this type of problem where it says P equals 2L plus 2W, you've always been used to having some actual number plugged in, saying it is equal to 3 times some variable plus some other number, and say, we'll go with 2 here. And you've always gone through the operations, whether you've memorized it or that you've learned what the operations are and you've learned this idea of inverse operations. A lot of people struggle with these rearranging formulas if you don't understand what an inverse property is and how it is that how properties are bound together and so forth. So, first things first, when you take a look at this particular problem, when we solve for x for this one, you're getting it down to that it says x equals. Okay, so essentially you're getting your x variable on one side of the equal sign and you're getting all your numbers on the other side. However about you choose to solve it is up to you, but either way at the end the important statement here is to solve for a variable is to get that variable by itself, so isolate the variable on one side. And you move everything away from the variable. You tend not to bring things towards the variable, you tend to move things away from the variable. So up here in this problem, okay, so that's what we're used to. We're now going to talk about the idea of solving for another variable. So the way you might see some of these statements of how they want you to solve, so in this one, it's currently solved for p because it says the p, which is isolated by itself, okay, there's nothing with this p, it's just p, is solved for currently, p being equivalent to the expression of 2L plus 2W. Now that's okay. It doesn't have to equal some particular number because this 2L plus 2W does represent one number, but the problem is we don't know what L is, we don't know what W is to actually plug them in to calculate it. So this is one number, it's just not calculated to be that one number. So, ways you might see this. Some textbooks might have a colon, okay, to indicate what variable it wants you to solve for. So if it has the colon and it puts a letter behind it, for instance, let's go with a W. Okay, what this is saying to you is that P equals 2L plus 2W, and the semicolon is they're indicating which variable they want you to solve for, and in this case they want you to solve for W. So that's what they use a colon. That's colon notation that could be having, or it could just simply say to you for W. So they have to indicate to you what variable they want you to solve for. So if they want me to solve for W, here's the whole goal, and that's to get the W by itself. So I'm going to take a green marker here and I'm just going to circle this W. So I want to get everything away from the W. I don't want anything to be on the side of W but just W. And currently right now what I have is 2L plus 2W. So I need to get rid of those things. Well, this all goes back to the idea of what can I remove from a variable first. And in this case what I want to get rid of is, if I can, we tend to remove the extra addition or subtraction to something. So in this case, I'm adding 2L to this. So what I want to do is I want to subtract the 2L. Okay? When I subtract the 2L, the goal is to make 0 here, so it cancels out. Okay, and then I get my line down the middle, and I like to do this just to keep things nice, neat, and orderly, so I get minus 2L. Now the thing is, on the left side, you're just going to script what you do, and you're just going to then keep track of it. So this says P minus 2L. I can't combine the P and the 2L, okay? They are now separate terms, and terms are separated by addition or subtraction. So this P and minus 2L, notice I say a subtraction or an addition. I can't combine them. If it was a multiplication or a division, okay, you could write it as one expression, but in this case you can't. They have to be written as separate terms because terms are separated by addition or subtraction. So I'm saying P minus 2L. They're not like terms because this is a P, this is an L. So there's nothing I can do other than to write P minus 2L. So I write P minus 2L is equivalent to. Now the 2L's on this side cancel out, and I'm left with what's left is a 2W. Now, some people will stop there, and that's not okay because I want to solve for W. I don't want to solve for some multiple of W, which in this case is 2 times W. I want you to solve simply for W. So what I can now do here is, just like I would before, as if I was solving for, let's say I had 8 equals 4x, you would divide by 4 because you're multiplying 4 by x. Same thing's going to apply here. So I would divide this side by 2, okay? And then I come over here and I divide this side by 2. Now the important thing here is that there's many ways, there's basically 2 ways that you will see this done. And the first way is you go, I'm going to take that entire algebraic expression and divide it by 2. So I'm taking the entire expression of p minus 2l, dividing it by 2, and then leaving it. I'm not going to do any simplifying after that, and I'm just going to leave it like that. So I cross out my 2's on this side because they reduce to 1, and I'm left with w equals whatever's on this side. So I'm just rewriting it. So p minus 2l divided by 2. Now that's not the only way that answer can be left. You can actually leave that answer, as opposed to dividing this whole thing by 2. You can divide each individual term by 2, okay, so all over 2, and then reduce them if you can. Well, p divided by 2 you can't do anything with, so that's just p divided by 2. Minus, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so this actually becomes minus 1l. So you would just write it as minus l. And this is essentially the way, you have the way 1 here, or you have way 2. And that's the way you would tend to see those. And 9 times out of 10, you'll see it usually in the back of a textbook like this, because it's the beginning, starting to learn this. But you could technically see it this way. They are the same thing, depending on your textbook or who you're, who's providing your answers, or how your teacher wants your answers written. This is the simplified form. I would say that this is not the simplest of forms, but this would be then the simplest of forms, and this is nothing wrong with either one. You're both solved for W. So that's an example of rearranging a formula for this particular problem, solving for W. Let's do another one. Okay, so we have some multiple examples here. I'm going to do 2 more. The first one I'm going to do here is, what happens if I have one that's all multiplication? So I have A equals 1/2 base times height, and I want to solve this for, let's go B. All right, so what I want to do here again is I'm gonna circle in green up here what it is that the one I want to get by itself, and in this case I want the B to be by itself. So I want to get everything else away from it. Now, the important thing here to understand is that I've got a 1/2. Fractions are not the same as whole numbers. When you divide whole numbers, sure, you just write them, the division bar, and write the whole number under it, and you go, okay, I'm dividing by this. Fractions, you can't do that, because when you divide by a fraction, you're really supposed to be multiplying by a reciprocal. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. I'm going to get rid of my fraction first. So most people would say, oh, divide by 1/2. And then, I mean, over here, I can't tell you how many times I say this, that kids don't understand that you need to multiply by the reciprocal, and they try doing as they did before, and they learn, for example, they have a problem that's like 8 equals 1/2 x. And then they write up here, divide by 1/2, divide by 1/2. And they type it in the calculator, and they get an answer, and then the answer they get is 16. But they don't have the slightest clue as to how they got 16. That's not going to help you here, because you can't write this answer as divide by 1/2, divide by 1/2. You cannot leave this. This is a huge no-no. You cannot do a divided by 1/2 like that. That is completely and totally, utterly not allowed by the rules of mathematics. That you're not allowed to have a fraction within a fraction. You're just not allowed. You have to reduce it another way. So you have to know that when dividing by a fraction, if you say that to yourself, because this is connected by multiplication, so technically you should divide. However, fractions are a tad bit different. You must multiply by the reciprocal. So the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to multiply the entire side over here by 2/1, which is just 2. And then I'm going to multiply this side over here by 2. So what I'm left with is 2 times a, which is okay. I'm not separating these ones, okay, by any sort of addition or subtraction. So 2 times a is 2a. It's the way we say it algebraically. So 2a is equivalent to, so in this case, 1/2 and the 2/1, the reciprocal, multiplied by the reciprocal, reduces the fraction, turns it into 1, so now I'm left with BH. And my last step for this one, if I'm solving for B, Well, B and H are connected by multiplication. The thing here is you gotta understand your properties, and when you do the vocabulary of understanding when a variable is right next to another variable or numbers next to a variable, that in algebra 1 or algebra 2, that's connected through multiplication. So this needs to be broken apart through the division. So you get divide this case by H, divide by H. And at this point I'm done. I can't divide 2a by h and get an actual number, so I leave it as b would be equivalent to 2 times a divided by h. Had I known a and h, I could find the value, but that's how I have to leave it. So essentially what you need to remember for rearranging formulas is that you must undo the operations as you see them. We're going to talk about one last one. And the last one I'm going to talk about is the h plus 2. This is just one I made up, divided by r equals m. Now the first thing we have to talk about in this particular one is that you can't subtract 2 first, okay? Because this h plus 2 is an expression that's bound by the division. So there's really like parentheses around this. So the first step you must do in this one is actually to multiply by r. And this is called essentially clearing the fraction. You multiply this side by r, and you get h plus 2 equals rm or mr. It doesn't matter the order for multiplication, but the last step I have to do is the minus 2, and I get h equals rm minus 2. And that's my final answer. So I hope that helps with any sort of problems that you're doing.